Welcome to episode 133 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast about people in Canadian theatre featuring conversations with actors, directors, playwrights, and more. The Toronto Fringe Festival starts this week, and I wanted to remind you of two special episodes of Stageworthy that you won't want to miss. On July 7th and 14th, I will be sitting down with a group of Toronto Fringe artists, and we'll talk about their shows, their experience of Fringe so far, and what shows that they have loved. Those episodes are recorded and released on the same day, so the Fringe news is as up to the minute as it can be. If you want to drop me a line, I would love to hear from you. You can find Stageworthy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. If you want to drop me a line, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Phil Rickaby, and my website is philrickaby.com. This week, my guests are Hayley Pace and Daniel Walsh of the teeny tiny music show's High School Symphony, which you will find at the Randolph Theatre as part of the 2018 edition of the Toronto Fringe Festival. The show is High School Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And now this is a departure for you, Hayley, because previously your shows have been site-specific for Fringe. So that was the Teeny Tiny Music Show, both in Hamilton and last year at the Toronto Fringe. This is the first time you got in on the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of presents a little bit, something a little different. In terms of staging this time.
Yes, it does.
What have you, aside from there being a designated stage that you're expected to work on, what has that done for you?
Man, I wish Ryan was here to talk about that, because he's the one who's going through that hell right now. Mm-hmm. Like, every time I talk to Ryan about the staging, he's always like, I just want to crack that proscenium open. I just want to crack it open. Like, I hate proscenium so much, you know, and it's because the nature of our show is so immersive, and we're so used to playing with, like, having the musicians hiding behind bars and having them hiding in the entrances and the exits and the fire doors and everything. And this time it's quite a challenge, because we're trying to capture that immersive element of the show without it feeling like it's just a kind of stale proscenium show, for lack of a better word.
Now you're at the Randolph, right?
Yeah.
Which isn't, it's not quite proscenium, it's proscenium-ish.
It's proscenium.
Okay,
we were really hoping for the annex, because it's a little bit more thrusty.
Yeah.
And it's like the stage isn't on a rise, and they have like those beautiful wooden, beaming and everything like that, and it kind of made your stage warm, and it made it feel like maybe it was a school or something like that.
Yeah.
But the Randolph is just a big giant black void. And I think that they gave it to us because our group is like, comprised of 10 people.
It probably has a lot to do with your numbers, just to fit that many people in the space.
Yeah, so it's been quite a challenge for Ryan, the director. He's really working hard to put people up in the balconies, to plant people in the audience, like casting the audience as students, and just kind of working around with those dynamics the best way we possibly can. That's the only way to do it.
Well, that's really all you can do.
Yeah.
What can you tell me a little bit about what the High School Symphony is about?
All right. So, like many of my shows, they're all based on true events from my life, which are fictionalized and become their own life within the world of the show. So, High School Symphony is about a friendship between two Catholic schoolgirls who are faced with suspension for sexually harassing their teacher.
Okay.
Which is actually something that happened at my high school.
But were you one of the... Did you sexually harass a teacher?
Well, it's a funny story, because how do I explain this? You know how you are when you're young,
Yeah.
and you just don't know the implications of your words.
Sure. You're stupid when you're young.
Yeah, we all do those things. And then, of course, when we're older, we reflect on our actions and realize that was kind of fucked up. So when I was in grade 10 sociology, I had a teacher who was very attractive, and me and my friend would kind of always make jokes about him to ourselves, between each other, but she would always take it one step too far.
Okay.
You know, it was kind of like, okay, like, don't, all right, that's enough. Like, we're all kind of shying away at this point. Like, I never took it that far, but she's the one who just went over the line with it. And one day she was caught talking about his ass, and another teacher heard her talking very loudly about his ass. And that's why she got suspended for sexual harassment. So it's...
She can't have been the only student to talk about a teacher's ass.
But to be caught is a different thing.
Okay,
like, and she wasn't like a quiet girl. Like, she's like a loud girl who's very verbal and vocal and doesn't care who hears it. Okay. So I think it was just a misstep for her, and she ended up being punished for that. And, and you know, it went around the school, and and it was quite dramatic for all of us.
and so you've taken that story and transform that into, because this is not just a play. This is like an immersive marching band sort of experience. Right. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So our first show that we ever made with this marching band theater company was a show that was styled around like a cabaret bar, like singer piano double act experience. And then throughout the duration of that show, more musicians would add to the arrangement of the music by surprise. Yeah. So, you know, you'd have them popping up behind the bar, and we did that show in the Hamilton Fringe. That was where we premiered with the company, and it turned out to really work with the audience. So we just, since that worked, that immersive element that excited people, got people interested in storytelling, we went further with the idea with the company and just said, okay, let's insert a different story into the formula that we've created and see what happens. Yeah. And some questions we've kind of had about the band is like, should we make the band part of the narrative? Yeah. Should we include them? Like, some ideas we tossed around were like, maybe we should have like the band is at the beginning of the show warming up for an assembly or something like that, and to make them part of the show. But we're still kind of fiddling around with that idea if we want to make them part of the show or just sell our show as this is the kind of storytelling we do. Dan can speak on that.
Yeah, but you're still trying to figure out whether, like, how much the band is going to be like part of the show right now, or
so I think like one of the like. I can at least speak to some of the changes that we've made already since the last show. So last year we had a pretty huge band, and you know, and like that was a really interesting experience because it meant that you had a lot of people to work with. Yeah. Now, that having been said, it also meant that like it made arranging for it really tricky, and it made things more difficult that way. Plus, we had some players that really wanted to take on a lot of the show, and some players that just couldn't because you know, they had other things that they were involved in. So this year we've kind of gotten more of a focused crew on like in terms of the musicians. So we've downsized a little bit on that end, but on the other hand, what we've done is we've given them a lot more speaking lines. We've incorporated some, like, sort of, I guess the way you could say it is like inflections, like musical inflections that enhance the dialogue a little bit, which is kind of cool. Plus, just, I think the music, at least the way that I've always been kind of thinking about this is that it's, you know, the whole story is kind of taking place from the perspective of Hayley reminiscing about this series of events, right? So when you're a teenager, and most of this takes place in like grade 9, like grade 8, grade 9, then there's like a certain magic to it, and there's a certain amount of like you don't remember all the dry bits, right? You remember things a little bit enhanced because everyone glorifies their childhood to a certain degree. Right. So this kind of the music is there in large part to kind of augment that, to give that feeling of like when you're reminiscing about the good old days when the radio played my music, that kind of thing. But except like we're in our 20s, so it's not that long ago.
Well, it's kind of interesting because not only do you like heighten that in retrospect because these were the glory days or whatever, but also because of all of the the flush of hormones going through your body, everything is heightened anyway.
Totally, yeah.
So
absolutely.
like the music must help to highlight that as well.
Yeah, no, it definitely like kind of we sexify a number of characters within the show. So basically, go and make a big deal out of them, and Hayley's got a couple of different crushes in the show, and they turn into key characters within how the show works. So that and the music is there really to help drive those moments and to make them stand up from that. And conversely, when there's certain times where we just lay out the music and then it's like, oh, this person is like lame as fuck. They're not how I remember them or like they're not as sexy as I perceive.
Right.
And that's also a thing that happens when you're a kid, like you put people on pedestals and then there's like that moment where you go, oh, holy shit, you're garbage.
Yes.
So there's a certain amount of that, like where like the coolness of certain characters gets downplayed by the fact that now, they're not holding an instrument, they're not playing anymore. Yeah. There's no music. They're just some guy talking about something. Right.
So very much like a musical. We take the classic musical and we don't question the fact that the actors start randomly singing. Sure. We don't question the fact that we see an orchestra in the pit. We accept it because we understand musicals as a genre of theater that tells stories. Yeah. And we go, okay, well, I suspend my disbelief into this, and I buy into this world. That's what I want to start going into that direction with the Teeny Tiny Music Show, that this is the world of our show. Our characters speak with their instruments. Right. The world of the show is augmented with music, and that's how we tell stories. Yeah.
This is a little bit of a departure because the Teeny Tiny Music Show had you covered songs in that. This, at least in the iteration that I saw, and we'll talk about some of the lifespan of this show in a second. I don't recall anybody singing, and I don't. There were, as far as I recall, like all the music was original.
Most, there's a couple of covers in there, but
they seem like it was completely, at least in my memory, unnoticed.
Right.
That we were covering something and it wasn't all like awesome original music. Yeah. So, is there anything in particular that drove you to that difference from covering well-known songs to original music?
Well, I definitely wanted to go in a different direction with the show because I'm trying to still explore what it is exactly we are and what we do as a company. And part of that is making your own sound and being original within that, so we can make an impression and an impact on the theater community. So whereas I think making covers was great for the Teeny Tiny Music Show lounge act experience, this is kind of more of a different experiment we're doing to see, okay, does this work better with telling the story? Because in some of our reviews, and of course the notes that I got from my mentors who helped me develop the show, the one thing that they always said was, we don't know if the music helps tell the story or the story helps explain the music. And I thought, yeah, like there was always that disjunct.
Yeah.
You know, there was one scene in the Teeny Tiny Music Show 2 in the Toronto Fringe where we had that seamless. It was the After Dark sequence that went into the Balkan sequence, and all that was streamlined. It was good, but there were other times where it was kind of like shifting gears. So we wanted to try to flatten that and make it more streamlined, that the music is kind of interweaved with the story more so than being kind of episodic sort of experience.
Now, the first time that you presented this to anyone was as part of Theatre Passmore's Crapshoot.
Yeah, yeah.
And with Crapshoot, you present, like, what, 5 minutes in the first time?
Yeah, the first time is 5 minutes of an original piece.
5 minutes, and then if you are selected, you come back and do
20 minutes, yeah.
So, how much did you have when you went in for 5 minutes? And... like, when you realized that you were going to be doing 20, was it a scramble? Was it, like, what did you have going in?
I remember I was, like, definitely writing charts, like, writing some of the original music that's been adapted to what we have now at the time, like, night before rehearsal, like, holy crap, I really gotta, like, figure out what the hell this is supposed to sound like. You know, because it was pretty tight, you know. But I think that once we got the first one down, the feeling I had was that the second one was a little bit smoother. Like we kind of knew, we had an idea of where we wanted it to go. It was just a matter of like solidifying what that would look like.
And I mean, musicians are busy people, like especially during like the summer and into the fall even, they're very, very busy.
It's herding cats.
Yeah, so we have to like meticulously plan our rehearsal schedules like 2 weeks in advance to accommodate everybody's availability or else we won't have a show. So I remember like when we did the first Crapshoot, the 5-minute one, I literally messaged the whole crew and the whole band. I'm like, I really want to do this. I think it's good exposure for us and I want to, you know, start getting seen by theater companies, professional companies in Toronto, and I think we need to do this. You know, and actually, I think you told me about Crapshoot.
I probably did.
And you're like, you should put Teeny Tiny into this. And I remember I couldn't because I didn't have enough time. But then it came around for this year. I said, I'm going to go for it. And I remember in rehearsal, we only had like 2 or 3 rehearsals for the 5-minute one. And we just extracted from some old stuff that the musicians already knew and kind of used that music. And then I slapped some monologue onto it and that was it. And I remember our trombone player, Nick, couldn't come to any of the rehearsals. And literally he was like, no, he came to some of the rehearsals, but he was like busting in the door like 5 minutes before we were about to go on stage because he had a gig. And it was literally like, okay, Nick, like, you know, it's in this key, like improv, and that's what you're doing. And Nick's like, I'm down. Like, that's what.
He was coming in from a wedding gig.
Oh my god!
So he's like there in his tux and all this stuff, and it's like
he's like, I'm ready. Where do you want me to go? And like teaching him the blocking like 5 minutes before we go on. And oftentimes that's what some of our rehearsals look like because it's just getting these guys availability when you have a crew this big and they're all like professional musicians is so hard. So that's why like sometimes it's a little bit like
stressful.
Like we're all gonna have heart attacks. But the end result, I mean, everyone has so much fun and the musicians love it, and we keep entering each year with the same company. So
going from that when you presented that 5-minute piece, what was the reaction like in the room? People
were going insane.
Yeah, people really loved it.
They loved it because they didn't see the 5-6 piece band come in. Like I came in with like my accordion, I did like a small little bit, did a monologue, and then I went and then I saw this guy and then 6 people come out all at once.
That's amazing.
And they were like, whoa!
That's amazing. That's amazing. So then you find out that you've won the Crapshoot and you have to do 20 minutes the next one. Now you have 3 months?
Yeah, it was. We presented the first one in September, and then we presented the second one in December.
Right.
So we got some support from Theatre Pass Mariah.
Nice.
We got free rehearsal space.
Oh, that's so good.
And we had like 5 rehearsals. So we put it together in 5 rehearsals. I was writing the script, getting it looked at by a dramaturg. We were just, you know, I had some ideas. I, you know, was taking some formulas from Teeny Tiny and shoving them at Daniel and being like, figure something out, write something.
Wow.
And that's how we came up with the famous note passing sequence.
Right.
Which is one of the star pieces in our show.
Daniel, what is, when you're writing for this, I don't know if, I mean, I know you're a musician, but do you have a theater experience, or do you like, so this is like, you're coming at this as purely from a musician's point of view rather than a theatrical point of view?
Yeah, like no real theater training. Like, I did street performing for a long time, which actually, like, I feel is not dissimilar from theater, weirdly enough. If only in the sense that, like, I think that when you know, I went to jazz school and all that stuff, and jazz school, there's no conversation about the audience. Like, there's not, that's never, like, that's never a subject that gets addressed in your whole undergrad, hell, probably master's and PhD too, if you really ask. You know, but when we went out street performing, then that was something that I learned a lot about. So how to, you know, how to create music that's going to kind of land with your audience and get them engaged and get them, you know, keep them on track. What's interesting about theater and what has been kind of weird is like lining things up with lines.
Oh, sure,
right?
Yeah.
So, you know, for sequences like note passing. So right now, for instance, we're it's funny watching new musicians learn the music for sequences like that, because for instance, we got a new keyboard player right now, and she's learning this piece, and everything is modular. So it's like these little snippets that loop, and then you wait for a cue, and then you have to move on. And sometimes the cue lines up with your 8-bar phrase. Yep. Sometimes it doesn't. So, you know, so it's like, so then you've got your classic like wedding band tactics where you've got eye contact stuff happening. You know, and of course, this is stuff that even in musical theater, like musical theater's a lot more rigid than this in their writing.
Sure.
Because you've got a conductor who can just be like, okay, this, you know, we're on to the next part, right? And you've got a click and you've got all that stuff. This, because we're all on stage and we're all completely visible, then you kind of have to be a little bit more discreet about that type of thing, so that you're not stealing the attention from, you know, from the real performance, especially when you're just playing as like just the rhythm section or whatever, right? So it's very different, but I think that everyone in the band, like, you know, everyone seems to love it. I've found it to be extremely interesting to work in this kind of environment, especially being someone who loves performance, like as a player.
But I mean, it's sort of interesting. When I worked with Keystone Theatre, we had our brilliant piano player, David Atkinson, who was basically the only sound. We were doing silent film live on stage. So we would create these things, and the only sound was the accompaniment of the piano, where he was composing stuff that he would play along with us.
Right.
But we would cue it, and we were really terrible, to be honest, about doing things with the music, because we're just fucking actors, so we would do it when it felt right. Right. And so it was really incumbent on him to make it work. And so we often put him through some difficult contortions, but also...
I believe the word is hell.
Yes. But interestingly, we did learn, like, by the time we did our show, The Last Man on Earth, over the course of, like, 4 fringe festivals. And so by the time we were at the last one, it was a conversation where, like, we'd do something and he'd be queuing up, and he'd, like, just, like, and he'd do something a little different with the music, and that would affect the show. It was, like, this back and forth. And so it was sort of this interesting thing. But, you know, actors can sometimes not be great to musicians, especially if there's no conductor. It's not like meticulously put together like a musical would be.
Yeah.
Is that a real struggle for, like you were talking about the new keyboard player?
Yeah.
Is this blowing her mind, or
I think everyone the first time that they do it, they go, "Oh wow, this is kind of weird." But I think that after a while you start to, like, part of the beauty of working with musicians like we have is that most of them are improvisers. So they're already kind of used to things being a little bit on the fly, and being able to catch things. So what that also means is that you've got some really cool moments that just kind of appear every once in a while because it felt right to, for the guitar player to lay out, for instance, right? It just felt like a good idea, so I think that at first it feels like that, but then as people get more into their comfort zone, then I think what's cool about this show is that there's a lot of musicians being musicians, and it's got enough space for that. It's not, it's not, because it's not so unbelievably tight like a traditional musical where where everything is really lined up down to the second, right? Like you've got that click going in your ear, and you know exactly where things are going to land, and if you miss it, it's super noticeable. And if you hit it, then that's great, and that means that everything can move forward. But there's no room for oh wait, we're having a moment with the vocalist, right? Like you can't do that, and this show allows for a bit more of that,
Yeah, like one musical that comes to mind that's a little bit similar is Rent. Like Rent has a lot of spoken word lyrics that actually, like when you see the sheet music, and the sheet music is like scary,
right?
Where it's like, you have each of your spoken words underneath like each beat in each bar, and everything lines up. So like if our actors don't have that training, it's a struggle. It's a struggle for, like, you need to be able to listen and hear beats and measure what it is. It's all that kind of actor training.
Well, what's interesting about what you're doing is and you mentioned this to me, that you had some of your musicians who kind of wanted to act in the show.
Yeah.
Which
was like, really?
Well, that was like, because, usually, sometimes when you say to the musician, so you're going to be on stage, and they go, excuse me?
Yeah.
And let alone, like, okay, so we have lines for you to say, which is an entirely different thing. So what was that like, putting musicians into the show while they're playing music, but also taking on like characters through the show?
Honestly, we found some gems. Like people just bloomed to life.
Nice.
With skills that they didn't realize they had. Like one that comes to mind is our trombone player, Nick. Like he's just grabs the idea and he just goes with it.
Right.
And he's just so natural. And I'm like, this guy has never been trained in his life, and he's just being himself on stage. And that's, like, to me, amazing. That's the thing that you lose when you go to theater school for 4 years. That sense of just being in the moment. Really. And of course, they have some issues with projection here and there, but all those things are very easy fixes. These guys are like brass players, they know how to use their body to create sounds, and it might be in a different way, but it's not too far of a jump for them.
Nice.
So, it was surprising to me to hear that they wanted to take on more. And I think the Painted Lady version that you saw was we kind of realized after the whole thing was done that we didn't really integrate those musicians / actors as one thing.
Right.
Like they were either acting or they were playing.
Right.
So I said, oh yeah, what were we doing?
Yeah, let's just like blend this
now. The new Fringe show is like we're making their characters like a blend of being an actor and like having dialogue with their instruments.
Nice.
It's like kind of like how say like you're in Montreal and most people speak to each other in French, but if you're not French speaking, they'll speak to you in English. It's the same way with musicianese. Like the characters who speak musicianese will speak that to each other.
Nice. Daniel, you play a role in this show.
Yes.
And how was that for you as somebody who's like more musician than actor?
That's been interesting. Like, I think so. The Fringe show was interesting because I didn't really know what to do with this character, and you know, and I think my first thought was like, okay, well, you know, let's just play what you see on the page, which is essentially the way that you do music. So it's like the first time you do your run of a thing, right? Then you should probably just play what's on the page, get it right. This time, like through that experience, though, I really learned some areas where it's like, man, that was cool and all. I think I can do a more interesting character. So I've been like talking to Hayley a ton about that and like trying to kind of flesh out what are better ways to go and do this. What are more interesting choices? Because that seems to be what acting is about. You've got these lines, but then the way that you frame them is what makes it are the choices that you have available to you that make the show right? And that make the character a compelling character.
And that's always something I encourage with my scripts and in rehearsal, is that if you want to go somewhere else with the lines, like, I am not precious about my script. Like, if they have instincts and they want to say something, or they want to say something a different way, I'm like, do that, because that feels natural to you. That's you coming from you. And so then by the end of the day, the script becomes like everyone's, you know, and their own. And I want them to be comfortable with that, you know. And Ryan always, when he's in rehearsal, he's like, I never want to be the only one speaking in the room. He's like, I want people to give me suggestions. I want people to like give me ideas. I'm very open. So the process is very collaborative. And that's what I like the most about it, because the musicians come up with some hilarious stuff, like hilarious stuff that I would have never thought of by myself. You know, they're awesome.
Aside from the lesson about the integration of the musician with the role that you talked about, were there other things that you learned from the Painted Lady presentation that was sort of really just like your first time like putting this in front of an audience? Are there lessons that taught you?
Well, I think the biggest one was that we wanted to see those characters who were musicians speak with their instrument. Like, we were missing that. The only character that spoke with his instrument was the object of affection, which was quote unquote David in the show. And so when we looked at it, we got some notes from our mentors. We went, wait, why aren't all the musician characters doing that? And I think that would, you know, the comedy of that whole thing would be just so much better, and that we're self-aware of the fact that like we are musicians putting on a theater show, and that's what we're doing. So that's one of the things we learned.
I feel like because I'm this is my first time music directing anything, so one of the cool things that I learned in this whole process was working alongside Ryan and Joseph to kind of leverage, to kind of develop this interesting compromise between how the musicians do musician stuff and how to make that make sense from a blocking and staging perspective that still suits the needs of the show. And then having on top of that the added complication of a live audience who who's all over the place. Like a bar is a cool space because people kind of sometimes they flock to the front, but usually they kind of hang out throughout. So in a show like this, you learn that the whole place is your stage, right? And there is no bad seat. A friend of mine came to see the show, and one of the pieces of feedback that he gave me, he got there late. He got in at the very back, and he was like, oh, man, you know, when I got in, I was like, crap, I'm not going to see anything. This is going to be horrible. And then he, like, at the end of the show, he was telling me about this, and he's like, yeah, but, you know, I was totally wrong, you know, and actually, I'd like to see the show again from another spot in the bar, not necessarily at the front, just for the sake of, like, witnessing different moments within the show.
Yeah.
And that's part of what's cool about this and about playing it in that kind of setting and with this collaborative environment that meshes theater and music.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why, like, the first time I saw the Teeny Tiny Music Show Lounge Act, I knew as soon as it ended that I needed to see it again. And I needed to see it again because there were so many things I felt like I missed. I was like, wait, so when did the violin player come in? It's like what I was thinking. I need to know, like, when that happened.
Oh my
and when
God.
did, like, so I came back just so that I could figure out the stagecraft of it.
Wow.
Because it was like I needed to see it more than once because it was so surprising that I was like, I need to know all these things.
Yeah.
Like, when does these things happen? So,
Yeah.
and I think that's sort of like, it's the same sort of thing. Like, what's the experience like when I sit here?
Yeah.
What's the experience like when I'm over here? Which is an interesting thing about this kind of theater.
That's the beauty of immersive theater, and I can't get enough of that. That's everything that I stand for as an artist. Like, I'm super about getting out of the theater and going to places where we're going to get people to see the theater. We need to reach out to more audiences than the theater people audience. And what I'm trying to do is get the music audience into my show because that is important.
Yeah.
The whole point of being an artist is to expand your audiences and to bring more people to understand the art. That theater isn't just one thing.
Yeah.
You know, it can be many, many different things.
Yeah.
And we talk about that so much in our community.
Yeah.
So those are the audiences that I'm going for. I'm going for music audiences, people who are like beer drinking audiences, people who like to go out to bars, who like to hang out, have a good time, like, you know, you can talk and chat, you can take out your phone, you can tune in, you can tune out, whatever you want to do. You know, I want to create that space.
Now,
so the
when
theater is...
well, now you're in a theater for this, which sort of like changes some of that outlook. Which is challenging. Like, there's the instinct for people to put their phones away. Are you going to encourage people to have them out, or is that even something you can do with Fringe?
There is no Fringe rule that says we have to put cell phones off.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to. I mean, we have to do a land acknowledgement speech at the beginning of our piece.
Can you have them do it? So it's not like, do you have to do it, or?
I think so.
Okay.
But I'm not sure exactly. Okay. That is the impression I was under. But I think, like, to accompany that speech, usually people say, and turn your cell phones off, and I'm going to say, and keep them on.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really care.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like one of those things where, you know, when I was working at the Edinburgh Theatre, we're always, you know, we tell people to turn their phones off, and we're always like watching for people who are recording them. And yet there's that instinct that people have that, and especially a certain generation of people have that I need to record this, or I need to capture this moment. Otherwise, how can I remember it? I want to share this with people, which is a way that you can, I mean, you can also leverage that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Why would you want to shun away your biggest marketing opportunity, which is your audiences? It's free marketing. Why would I want people to not take pictures of my show while I'm performing it?
Yeah.
You know, it's the same thing about people who go, oh, I'm an artist and I don't have Facebook. I'm like, are you nuts? Like, that's your biggest audience is Facebook. People are always on Facebook.
This is the thing, is if you're making your own stuff, at this point you have to leverage social media.
Yeah.
There's, like, that's almost that's more valuable to you than, like, taking an ad out in a print.
Oh, 100%.
Yes, it is, because every single person I bump into on the streets, even if I haven't talked to them in months, all of them know I'm doing a show. Absolutely,
they do.
And that's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all I care about.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But there's one more thing I wanted to say about learning things. One of the things we learned in The Painted Lady was delay. how do we deal with sound delay?
Oh, fuck, yes, of course.
Because if we have a saxophone player all the way on the other end and the space isn't properly mic'd, like our rhythm section who keeps together the entire music.
Yeah.
And we have the rhythm section over here. We have Stu on drums who's keeping everything together. If there's a delay, they can't actually play in time.
Well, fuck. Yeah.
So, I mean, Daniel's been talking a lot. I mean, you can comment on this about when we, start making some more money, we want to like have our own gear where we set it up. We set up speakers. We have the rhythm section mic'd. We have everyone mic'd so we delete that issue entirely.
Yeah.
But that's our biggest problem at indie level.
Yeah. Well, and like there's that, but also working in spaces that can accommodate that because there's, like one of the issues we ran into at Poppers was that their place was like, they just kind of put speakers wherever was like out of the way.
Sure.
And what that led to was a ton of feedback issues. So contending with sound on this kind of thing is really tricky. And, like I'm still kind of two minds about it, whether or not we need to get a bunch of wireless gear for everyone and just have everything going that way. Which is expensive, but doable, or if we should go the other way and just kind of live with that, and because then you don't have to deal with like the technical issues of like feedback. Of course, the issue still comes in where Hayley and Kate, the co-star, are they're still using these wireless body pack mics, which can be a little bit tricky to work with.
It's tricky, but it's also like you're trying to project over an orchestra that's like right there, which can be challenging.
Yeah, and that's why we figured like when we got notes from the people who are helping us develop the show, they were saying, we don't care if we see anything, everything. We care if we hear everything.
Yeah, that's true.
So, we are even thinking like cheaper ways to deal with the audio issue. The people who aren't mic'd, what we're thinking about doing is like passing an SM58 between them. Like it's like wrestling match style, mic passes, like figuring out ways to get everyone mic'd in an inexpensive way is like another thing that we're trying to overcome for the Fringe this July.
There's the most basic way, which we've kind of tackled, especially like this is one of the nice things about having all this custom written music for the show. A lot of the arrangements are written around accommodating speech, right? Yeah. So like, note passing is the best example because we've got the A section, B section where, it's not just to keep it lively, it's like to keep the song going. We've got the A section, it's nice and big and bold, but the B section comes way down. And we do that on purpose because we need to accommodate speech. So I think that's kind of the lo-fi version of that, but it's been pretty effective, I think, and it makes a big difference.
It does,
Now, you guys did something interesting after your Painted Lady edition. I saw you did a presentation at a school.
We did.
How was that?
That was incredible to witness how to get a high school audience to listen to the show.
Well, that's always a trick when you're going into a school.
Man.
And I've done stuff, and I did when I was in theater school. We did a tour of an educational show to high schools, and it was this was in the early '90s. So of course the topic we were talking about was AIDS. And so we're going into schools, and we are trying to present this educational show. That opens with a dance number, and so here we are, a bunch of theater nerds trying to dance like we're cool, and we're not. And we're at I remember at one school, and we get to the Q&A, and one guy stands up, and the first question that anybody asks is this guy says, "So, are you guys homosexuals or what?" And that was like the whole this was emblematic of our experience. So the question is the whole thing with that show, the dance number was supposed to grab the kids. Instead, it kind of
it shut them down.
So how did you grab them?
Well, the one thing that I really aspired to was that if I was going to do a show about being in high school, I had to speak their language. Like, we had to write lines that spoke their language, how people spoke, what they said, the language they used, and make sure that that is honest and that is true to that era. You know, I would be opening up little notes that were passed to me in high school, and I would read the language, and those are things that ended up in my script. You know, and some of it was like harsh and like awful. You know, some of the things that kids say, like, they're smart. Like, they're not stupid. They know what things are. They know. Yeah. They know. So that I wasn't going to shy away from that when I wrote this piece. You know, I was nervous about it being controversial. I was nervous about making statements as an artist, especially with the content. Yeah. But it was true to the era. Yeah. So I stuck with that. And to my surprise, we got them. Yeah. By the end of the show, when we had the big final, the fight between the two girls at the very end, where we were like dissing each other back and forth. You know, there was one diss I make to Kate, the co-actor, and everyone in the audience went, "Oh!" Like that. Like, they were into it. Yeah.
Was it hard to get them though? Like, how were they into it from the beginning, or did you have to like fight to get them?
One of the things I did was, like, I spoke to them. You know how I start my shows? I usually keep it very casual. I'm speaking to people. And then I go into the show gradually. That's kind of my thing. That didn't work so well with this crowd. Because everyone is rowdy, everyone's talking, they're talking to each other, they're waving to their friends, they're being goofy. So when I went into the show, no one knew. Right. Of course, yeah. So it was like they were all still rowdy, and I was starting to hit like plot points, and none of them were listening. So that was the one downside that I wasn't expecting going into the high school show. Because in the bar, everyone knew when we were going into the show. I joined the stage and I went, "Hello, everyone." Yeah. But in this proscenium, I was on the stage already. Yeah. And I was chatting up people in the front row and stuff like that. Yeah. So no one knew that I was starting the show.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about, like, being in high school, at least I remember this, the worst thing that anyone can try to do is relate to you. Like, you know, like, when you're in high school, that's the last thing you want someone to do. You want someone to treat you with respect, to treat you with dignity. You know, like, you don't, you know, the only people who walk up to you and try to relate to you are those people that are trying to sell you the monthly donation packages on the street. Like, those are the only people in our adult lives who kind of patronize us at that level, where they're like, "Hey, I really like your backpack. It's great. You want to talk to me about giving some money to water or something?" Yeah. You know, like, that's the only time that anyone does that, you know? So, and kids, I think, they get a lot of that because they're perceived as kids, especially in high school, and they're not kids, really. Like, they're miniature adults, right? Yeah. And they've figured out enough of the world. They have opinions, regardless of how maybe disconnected from the real world they may be. Yeah. But they still have those opinions, and they're formed on their experience, and you kind of got to respect that, right? And that's part of, you know, part of what Hayley's saying here, where you've got, like, this show that is that's written about that era, you know, and that where kids say things that are not, like, you know, not totally politically correct. Yeah. And kids behave in ways that are kind of inappropriate. Yeah. Right? And, you know, but if you're not true to that, then you're going to lose them, right? Mm-hmm. So either you need to come to them, like, from the perspective, you know, because I've done my own, like, high school stuff where I've been to high schools and done workshops on music stuff. Mm-hmm. And with them, it's like, either you come in and you know, the way I treat them is I walk in as a professional and I'm talking to a bunch of professionals, right? Just professionals that don't have the same experience, but I still talk to them in that way, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's one way of doing it. Or you level with them at the level of, like, this is literally how you speak. And you reflect themselves back at them. Those are, in my opinion, the only two ways of getting around that. Otherwise,
Well, they have. I mean, the thing that people forget is that teenagers have an incredible bullshit meter.
Yes,
like when you're
fed so much bullshit.
Oh, sure. When you're sitting down, you're being like, "Hey, I'm a cool guy, and we can have a cool guy conversation." The two of us are like, "Fuck you, you fucking fuck." Is like that's what I'm gonna say. It's like, I know exactly what you're doing. You fuck.
Yeah, man.
You can't relate to me.
Don't you dare relate to me.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
So you can't do that. You either like go down, like reflect them right back at themselves.
Yeah.
Or you go the opposite way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
but there's no in between. There's no halfway point that's going to make anyone feel like they got anything out of the conversation, right? Yeah. So, and that's tricky. So, I think that was a tough thing. And, one of the things that I really would like to do with this show is I'd like to start shopping it around to more of these venues. So either bar venues, because one of the things that I wanted to mention earlier was that we had a bunch of people when we played the Painted Lady who were just at the Painted Lady, like they just they were just hanging out, right? And it's like you remember that night, it was sleet and disgusting, freezing. And it was not supposed to be that cold, but it was.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and it was miserable. And we got a decent amount of our sales off of them. But they were really into it. Yeah. And they really enjoyed it. And they, so far as the accounts I was told, they brought their friends. They called someone up mid-show and were like, "Hey man, yeah, I'm down at the Painted Lady. You should come check this out." Right? And
wow, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I heard.
Crazy.
Yeah. But, I think my old roommate, he was telling me something about that.
Wow.
Yeah. But, but people just did that. Yeah. That was just a thing that they did because it was a cool thing that was happening.
Yeah.
And, same with at these high schools, right? Like we had the district representative for the school who came out, and she was kind of interested in us, and obviously we toned down the language a little bit to make it more.
Yeah, we took out a lot of the swear words.
Yeah, but she really enjoyed it, and these are all ways that we can kind of branch out and get into more spaces, right? And again, on the bar end, it means being maybe a little bit choosy about which spaces we go into. Yeah. Finding a bar owner that's willing to work with us, who's also got a space that sounds good. Yeah. And then on the school end, making sure that we kind of level with the teachers and be like, hey, this is a very real way of showing these kids how they are, right? And it's going to be that way. So if you're not cool with that, then we can't work with you.
Yeah.
Right?
One of the interesting things is that I can see this working in a high school because it isn't overtly teaching them something. No. We're not coming in and being like, all right, kids, let's have an educational conversation.
Yeah.
And you could just be like, we're just here to do this thing for you.
Yeah. Tell your story.
And then afterwards, if we have a conversation and you mention that you learned something, then great. But
yeah.
That's not what we're here to do.
Yeah.
Overtly.
Yeah, I think the greatest theater is theater that doesn't try to spoon feed you the playwright's own bias.
Yeah.
The greatest theater is seeing things from everyone's perspective and being able to empathize with your antagonists and truly give them a point of view. And that's what I try to do all the time when I write a show.
And one of the things that's interesting is and it takes some bravery to not feel like you have to tell the audience what you mean. Because, you want to be understood. But once you've done it, it's not yours anymore. And that was one of the lessons that we learned with Keystone Theatre, because one of the things that you can't do when you can't talk is tell the audience your backstory.
Right.
They only know what they know right now, what they see. And so what we started out, people would be like, oh, there was a show about this, and this is what happened, this is what happened. We'd be like, that's not what happened. But after a while, it became like, okay, that's what you got out of it.
Yeah.
Because we started to be able to let go of what we thought it meant.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's what you think it meant. And
that's cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That we can all see the same thing and be moved by it, but you saw something different than you saw, which is always fun.
That's real life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone sees other sides of the story.
Yeah.
People are blind to other sides of the story, and that's why we have different perspectives, and that's why we have people falling out of friend groups and relationships, and that's why. Because we all see our own realities.
Yeah.
So that's what theater should be like.
Yeah, you should like focus group that shit. All right, so what do you think?
Yes. Well, I mean, the thing is that, like, I'm okay with it being messy that way.
Yeah.
Me too.
But it took me a long time to get there. Like, the first time that we did The Last Man on Earth, and people were like, oh, but it was this. And I was like, no, but that's not what happened. But, like I said, like, you know, we went Montreal, we went Winnipeg, Calgary, Edmonton. And by the time we were done in Edmonton, it was like, so what did you get out of it? Like, what do you think happened? Yeah. And I was fascinated by the way that everybody had their own interpretation. And it was so, like, being able to just let it go and just be like, if that's what it means to you, that's cool with me.
Did anyone ever, like, nail it? Like, just nail exactly your intention the whole way through?
No.
Okay.
No. But it was, like, not a single person, like, didn't like it, and not a single person didn't relate to who we wanted them to relate to.
Right.
There were, like, nuances that were not quite what we intended, but they understood. Nobody was like, "Oh, that didn't make any sense." It was just that they were able to make sense of it in their minds in the end.
Cool. That's really neat.
So you guys are performing at the Randolph Theatre, which is a big space.
Yeah.
It's a big space. A little different than Poppers, and a little different than the Baldwin House in Hamilton. A little different, the Baltimore House, and a little different than than Popper. You know,
Painted
Lady. Yeah, it's. So this is an exciting thing.
Yeah. Well, you know, we were told by our people who help us, our mentors, our fans, like, go for it.
Yeah.
Like, this is what we need to do with this.
Yeah.
We need to make that proscenium goddamn exciting. Make it more, you know, like, and I keep saying, like, I guess this is why we're doing it in this theater.
It's interesting because if we're looking at Fringe, there is sort of a like, site specifics can be kind of ghettoized.
Yeah.
They don't get all of the attention.
No, they don't.
They don't get a whole lot of attention. And so, like, for you guys to have this show noticed in a way that it needs to be, you kind of have to be in one of the venues that maybe is a challenge for you.
Yep. So, and that can either hinder the show or help it. I don't know what that is yet. I mean, you know, we've already sold 11 tickets. Like, that's cool.
Well, that is pretty good for this early. I mean, it's like weeks away.
I know. I'm like, okay, I think last year when I was doing the show in Poppers, like, there was no fucking way I was selling tickets in June. Like, are you kidding me, man? Like,
that just wasn't a thing.
Yeah,
we started selling
sales,
them like a week before.
But that's one of the advantages to being in the main spaces.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, yeah, it's like one of those things, and then it's the hustle for, like, once Fringe starts.
Well, yeah, because people see shows in circuit.
Oh, sure,
in the venue, and that's how we're going to pull in new audiences, and I'm really excited about that because I think a lot of our audiences last year were most of our friends.
Yeah,
and that was getting dry.
Well, yeah.
So,
but again,
also,
this
is the biggest house we've ever had.
Well, that's the thing, because that's what
I
like.
A 215-seater house before.
That's the thing about that space is like it's like
huge.
Now you got to hustle, and that's a different kind. It's a different kind of hustle.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I'm scared as hell because we don't open on the 4th. We open on the 5th, and we don't have another show until the following Sunday.
Yeah.
Like we have.
So we got a gap.
Yeah, we have a 2-day gap.
Yeah.
We only have one show to make it work before the reviews come out, and that scares the crap out of me.
Yeah. But there's something about that kind of fear that can really be motivating.
Oh yeah, we went this year. We're gonna schedule busking in with the band.
Oh yeah.
We went from 7 to 9 with breaks. We're gonna be hustling that Fringe tent with our band and playing, if not inside, outside, and handing out our postcards like nuts. Because that's one thing we really screwed up last year. We didn't schedule that, and we didn't flyer the tent aggressively on the first week, and we lost.
Well, I mean, because it's so important to do that.
I know.
And also the venues, like flyering lineups in Toronto. And every Fringe is different, but in Toronto, because of the nature of the beast, like the lineup is so important to flyers. Yeah. So it's got to be done.
I know. Yeah, I know.
Well, you know, like, and part of what we're trying to do, like, you know, what we're trying to do with these, even like the little busking spots or whatever, like, they're really like little tiny mini shows, right? Like that are kind of immersive as well, which is cool. And part of the point of that is to, again, get people enough of a flavor in their mouth of what the vibe of this is, and entice them. Because I think that, like, you know, the number of, you know, walk down Queen Street and see if you can walk out without a sample, you know, a pamphlet, you know, or someone screaming at you, you know, being like, buy this shit. You know, you can't do it, right? No. David's Tea will throw tea at you.
Yes.
You know, like, you just can't get away from it.
Yeah.
Right. So having someone having something that's a little bit more, you know, a little bit more like, hey, jump in if you want. Right.
It's a different kind of. If you guys come in with some music that is not like, if your approach is not obtrusive, because people in a line, if it is a popular show, they are walking away with a stack of flyers, or at a certain point they're like, I'm shutting down. But you guys have the opportunity to come in with something a little different. Which is interesting.
Yeah, we're going to do some experiments with that. Like, we played around with it a little bit at Dundas West Fest, where we were trying to do, like, activities. Like, the actors would kind of be doing things like skipping rope or something. And trying to get people to come in, and then the band would be playing music. And again, it felt like kind of two separate entities. But people were coming up. Like, people were jumping rope with us, and they were getting involved.
Nice.
But we haven't quite figured out how to integrate the two things yet. Like, make the music part of the activity. And that's what we want to try and accomplish.
It'll be really interesting to see what you guys have. We're going to have to stop, but thank you guys so much for having this conversation. It's been great. This has been a Homebody Productions production.